welcome one and all to the Friends of the Wendell Library program on Living Wendell History. We thank you all for coming. What a wonderful turnout we have this afternoon. We have many people to thank. We want to thank the Public Programming Committee from the Friends of the Wendell Library, who met with great creative energy and dreamed up this and other day-two happenings. We want to thank Adele Smith-Penniman, who got the ball rolling after that meeting, and we want to thank Kathy, who, after Adele handed it over, did some further organizing and inviting and arranging of our stars. Did I have other things I wanted to say? The food, we want to thank everybody who brought food, Nina and Adele and Laurel and Lisa and the Diamonds. We have a great abundance of food, which is a wonderful moment to remind you to go have some.
Is for our four speakers to talk about their relationship with Wendell and Wendell's history. Each has agreed to speak for 8 to 10 minutes. And after that, we'll take a break for more refreshment, and then we'll come back for questions and answers. Because of the microphone situation, if you think you're going to ask a question, it would be most convenient if you would sit on this side after the break. Okay? For now, I too want to thank you all for coming out, and very much thank our speakers. And especially, I want to thank Faheen and Almaid Muhammad for coming to televise this. They are connected with the Athol-Orange television, community television program, and they'll be making a tape and putting it on that TV, and tape will be available in the library, and tapes are available for purchase if you find this memorable, which I hope you will. I plan to order a tape myself, and if you speak to me, I will order for you. They should run somewhere like $10 or less. And you can have a tape or a DVD pretty easily, as I understand. So, this program has been advertised with the questions: how did the Depression put the Wendell State Forest on the map? When did electricity first come to Wendell? Who came to Wendell looking for a place to keep some pigs? Can you imagine walking to Orange for a movie and then walking back? And the Muhammads have in mind similar overlapping questions, which we hope will also be answered. They are: why did you choose to settle in this area? What expectations did you have about living here? What surprised you? What problems did you encounter? What do you like about living here? What would you like your neighbors and community members to know about you? I've asked the speakers to speak in the order in which they first came to Wendell, and that means we start with Ted, who came in the 30s, and we move on to Elsie, who came in 1940. Theo's father bought a house here in 1938, but she did not come until several years after that.
I had to wait to be born.
Yes, there was that. And Everett is the relative newcomer. He came about 1950. So, Ted, tell us about walking to the movies in Orange, walking to see your wife's basketball team play in New Salem, and picking blueberries and selling them for a nickel a quart. Think about it. Or whatever.
Yeah. Well, everything you say is true. But, we bought shoes for $2 then, and I got to tell you about it, because all us kids had to have what we called high cuts, and high leather boots. They had a pocket for a jackknife. They cost $2, but you get them wet once, you never get your feet in them. But you didn't get another pair of shoes either, not then. We did pick blueberries. A guy come around from Irvin, picked up the berries, We got 5 cents a quart, saved our money. And we'd go to a fair in Athol once a year. We had $1 we could take. We had to walk to it, and that's where the high school is now. That was the Athol Fairgrounds. And we'd go over there. But as far as the movies, I did walk many times to Orange. My brother-in-law, he ended up my brother-in-law, wasn't then, but we'd walk to Orange, go to the movies, walk home. And once in a while you might get a ride, but not very often. We moved here, my folks, my grandmother was living here in what they call the old Tucker place. I don't know who owns it now. It was Estabrook would probably be the last one most of you people know down there. It was a big barn, it was a big farm. We moved from Connecticut up here because my father's business, depression, went out, so we moved up here. We moved down West Street in 33. There was a schoolhouse there. And then in 34 they opened up this one as a schoolhouse. So, I don't know, been around, I went in the service and came back to Wendell. I could tell you a lot.
How about the hurricane?
The hurricane in 38, that was, well, we thought it was funny. I was only kids, 10 years old, but the pigs were being blown all over the place. But my wife's folks, where Margot lives, they lost their barn, and what's the barn now across the road is the remnants left of it. They had a big old barn that got blown away. They lost the roof to their house, so they come down to our house. Of course, we didn't have no telephones, we didn't have no chainsaws, never heard of them, and a lot of trees down, and it was days before you could get anywhere, just cutting trees. But we all survived. Nobody, I heard, got hurt. They had the floods in Wendell Depot, took out all the dams and the bridge. And my brother was standing on the bridge when it started to go down here, my oldest brother, when it started to go, but nobody really got hurt. So it's been a good town. I mean, we all have our problems. But we were brought up as Grangers, and the Grange was very strong. It was all farmers and sawmill operators around here. And to go to school for sports, which you had to mention, I'm not a good player of sports, but I used to be scorekeeper and help do other things. And my wife was playing basketball. Ended up my wife wasn't then, but we had to walk from New Salem home if we wanted to go to a game. And we did it. Sometimes, because her father had a car, but he only took it out in the summer. He didn't take it out in the winter. And there was only 2 cars on West Street in them days, my father's and Mr. Harrington, who lives where Everett lived. Mr. Harrington worked in the railroad yards, and my father was a painter who worked in Orange and things. So it's been good. If we wanted to go skating or anything, we walked. And we thought it was a great joke. In them days, we'd slide on, we call it Town Farm Hill or Weatherby Hill. The sand trucks would go through. Of course, it was all thrown on by hand. We'd take a broom, sweep it off, and then we'd slide. We knew the sander wasn't coming back. And my father had a school bus, and he had the New Salem route. Ray Clark had the Orange High School. And we went the back way, and we get swaying, a bunch of us in the back of the bus just to get him stuck going up where the dump is over there now. Anything to get late to school, We had a lot of fun, but we had to make it. You walked if you wanted to get anything done. You had your chores to do, but then you played afterward, and then you did your homework. And there was no telephone, no radios, but we had fun. The best thing we liked was walking up to the library on Saturday, getting a book. And of course, I liked Zane Grey then, so I got all his. So.
Smell that same collection.
I hope so. But, I mean, it was good. And a rarity is when you get somebody like Mrs. Bennett's mother and father, they moved on West Street. We said, what are they coming from New York and living here in Wendell for? And they'd go up to the library all the time. So we had some good neighbors, and Well, you can see I've survived it.
Good. You've got a good memory.
I know you're my girlfriend.
Thank you, Ted. Elsie, can you give us some starting points for later discussion?
Well, I will tell you, this is a big surprise. I guess, once upon a time, they took my picture on a motorcycle, and I have no idea how to, well, anyway. Now, this is the second big thing that's happened. Well, anyway, what I did, I wrote all these things down, because, okay, are you ready? First of all, I want to tell you that I enjoy living in Wendell. I've only lived 2 other places in my life, in Northampton and in Newington, Connecticut. But I like it here. Anyway, the people are nice. They're friendly. Okay. Do you mind if I just read these things? Okay. If you get bored, just raise your hand and keep quiet. Okay. No, I can't read my writing. Okay. My husband bought the place, the farm, in 1936. He wanted to get his mom and dad out of now this is a family secret, so don't tell it. In those days, in the backyard, everybody had a grapevine, so they made wine. And a lot of times, my father-in-law didn't come home. She'd have to go after him. So that was it. So Al bought the place in 1936. And there's been a lot of changes. I didn't come into the picture until 1940, the end of 1940. Okay, so we only had one telephone, and that was over at the end of the road. If all of you, many of you are probably not familiar with Mormon Hollow. Well, some are, some aren't, anyway. But by all means, if you're not, come down and visit me sometime, okay? We'll sit and we'll have a cup of tea. Or if you want coffee, we'll make coffee. Anyway, here are some of the things I jotted down that I thought would be of interest. As far as telephones or electricity, we had one telephone on Mormon Hollow Road, and that was at the end of the road to be used only in an emergency. Okay, so then as the years went by, they put in an 8-party telephone. Well, men don't talk that much on the phone, but women, they really have a gift of gab. Al would pick up the phone, and the lady over the road would, he'd say, Katie, she's dead now, so it doesn't matter. None of her relatives are here. Okay. He'd say, Katie, can I have the phone, please? No, Al. I pay for this phone, and I am going to talk on it as long as I want. So that was it. Okay, that had to do with the telephone. Eventually, they did put, one-party lines on. Okay, the electricity. We didn't have electricity for a long while, but a friend of Al's got together with him, and they put a windmill on the roof and a double, I remember this, I never knew what it was, but a double Delco battery in the cellar. And by that, we were able to have just lights, no appliances. But anyway, that was good. And that goes back to the ice boxes. Do any of you know what an ice box is like? Oh, you do? Oh, well. Anyway, it's something that you put a big chunk of ice in, and in the morning, you empty the pan underneath. Nighttime, you empty the pan underneath. So anyway, but that's what an ice box is like. Let me see what else I got here. Okay, the mail. Okay, we have for a long while, we've gotten our mail through Miller's Falls. And some people wonder why we don't get it through Wendell. Well, the reason is that years ago, men used to work at the cutlery and at the shops in Miller's, and they used to walk down. Not too many of them had cars, but they used to walk down and they would go to the post office before they came home and get the mail. So that's how come we had Miller's Falls. Okay, that's another one. Okay, now I can't read my writing. Okay, I read these to Ann, and she said, well, Mom, anyway, I said, Wendell, it has 3 parts, Wendell Center, Wendell Depot, and Mormon Hollow. And she said, well, you left out the part that's New Salem. Well, I'm sorry if you people are from New Salem, but I didn't mean to leave you out. Anyway, okay, that's Wendell. Let me see what else was. Oh, school. Okay, we had, I think it was Lucille Lewis, that was the teacher, and we had a 2-room schoolhouse, which was, I think that was this building, I'm not sure. Well, anyway, Lucille was a real good teacher, and I miss her because she was a real nice person. Okay, there was only one thing that I put in. This may shock you, but anyway, it's all part of life. Okay, one time the kids came home, and they had a note with them. Something had gone through the school, and they had head lice. Now, I don't know if you know what head lice is, but it's these little bugs or something that crawl around in your head. And not only my children, but, you know, some of the others had it too. So what happened was you washed their head real good, and then you put something on it. I don't remember what it was. And then they had to wear a white cap. They didn't like that. But they didn't go to school, so it didn't matter. And Peter probably doesn't remember that, and Ann probably doesn't remember it. Anyway, they're hiding. That's all right, I'm doing okay, don't worry about me. I got one more to go. Oh, the Wendell Church. Hi, young man. Oh, I have a private audience. What's your name?
Colton. And Colton, but people want me to go injury again.
Oh, that's a nice name. Okay, can you hear me okay?
No, I'll be able to.
Well, what? Okay. Hey, this is really something. They ought to take your picture. And you know what? I bet if you turn around, when I'm through talking, you turn around, maybe he'll take your picture. Will you?
What if they take a picture of me?
Okay, there's just...
I mean, it would be fair if they take a picture of me, they take a picture of everyone.
Oh, we got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
This is Colton. I'm Brett. I'm
Oh.
Brett.
The Wendell Church, I never went there as a member, but I had gone into it for different services. And that was the most beautiful church. There was I remember the seats had like red plush, and the altar was beautiful. It really was. And I think that they had a minister, somebody come once a week. I really don't know what happened. I mean, how it went up. Okay, so much for the church. There's so many people that, am I using up my time?
Just about.
Just about, okay. One more, I better, no. Everybody be quiet. The Wendell Church, it had these beautiful seats. I think, and I don't know if you remember Harry Thayer, but anyway, he taught Bible lessons. And Harry was such a good person, and I do miss him. Okay, let me see what this is. 2 sections. I can't. Oh, romance. Oh, you gotta have this. Maybe I should have it at the end. Let me see. And Mormon Hollow is called that because Brigham Young, who was a Mormon leader, went through at one time and settled there. Anyway, that's it. Okay. Oh, okay. Let me see. Oh, no, I'm going to put, have I got 2 more minutes? Okay. I almost was not wound up by not being here because my husband bought me a washing machine that had a gasoline motor. Okay, this was really something. So what I was supposed to do, we have the kitchen, then we have a room there, and I was supposed to take the gasoline hose or whatever it was, the exhaust, and put it out the window of that other room. Well, it came out of the window, and I only had 2 children at the time, and they were so groggy, so I put them in the bedroom. They were sleeping, and I began to get so groggy, and Al came in the door, and he said, "What is going on here?" Anyway, he went around, he could smell the fumes. So that was the narrow escape. Let me see, one more thing. This is at the end, and it's nice. Okay, now I don't have the records, but here in Wendell, there were 2 sisters that married 2 brothers. It must be on record somewhere, I don't know. 2 sisters married 2 brothers. And then they fell in love with each other's husbands. So they got a divorce, and then there was another wedding. Now that was before my time, so I don't know, but maybe it's in the record somewhere. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is wonderful.
Thank you, Elsie.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Theo Bennett is our next speaker.
I'm Theo Bennett, and I live on West Road. My parents bought our house in 1937. It had stood vacant for about 12 years at the time they bought it. The very old couple, the Stebbinses, who had lived there, had died in the mid-20s. And the Stebbins family is buried in Locks Village Cemetery. My family has owned our house for almost 70 years, and we think we're only the 2nd family to have lived there. I have a photograph you can look at later if anyone is interested. When we had some renovation done on our house, we found a scratched date on a beam that says January 3rd, 1810. And so the age of our house is probably almost exactly the age of Kathy and Margot's. Ours are probably a little bit younger than Claire Stewart's. There are some bigger, finer houses in Wendell. There's the parsonage. There's the 2-story house that's now part of Maple Grove, Lake Grove School. But it certainly is one of the older houses in Wendell. I remember Wendell first really very vividly from the 40s. We had dirt roads, like Ted and Elsie have said. We had no plumbing. We had no electricity. I remember the party line, telephone 8-party line, and the first version of that we had, there was a manual ring done by an operator. It wasn't mechanical. So you had to really pay attention because the rings were 1 through 8, and it didn't have a regular interval because it was some lady at the telephone exchange doing it. That improved later to a 4-party line that was rung mechanically. That was a long, short system. And as Elsie said, finally we got our own lines. My memory of the 40s and into the 50s is, certainly for us, once we got to Wendell in June, we didn't go much of any place. I think in 2 decades of living here as a child. I went to Boston once, and when we went, we spent the night. I mean, that was just like a huge trip. Shopping here, there was a store run by Mr. Carey on the corner across from the library. That building, that house burned down, and what was the barn of that house is now the dwelling on that corner. There was a truck that came around. Do you remember that? With bread and groceries.
Levitt's from Orange.
Yeah, and I don't know how often they came, but that was a way that you could get things. Our family went to Orange once a week to do our shopping, going to town. And Orange was a very lively and full place. There were 2 hardware stores. There were 2 banks in real buildings. There was a variety store, a furniture store, bakery, a jewelry store, Cormier's where you could get your car fixed. You could really pretty much do what you needed to do in Orange. Physically, besides the dirt roads, Wendell was somewhat more open than it is now. There was more cleared area. A fair amount of it were old farmland that really hadn't grown in again, but it was more open. On our road, West Road, as I first remember it, I think there were 11 houses. The road's almost 2 miles long. There are now, I think, 31. There are now about 3 times as many people live in Wendell as did in the late 40s and early 50s. There was the Diamonds farm. There were a few other farms. The ones I remember best were Merle Powling's, where his grandson lives now. He had dairy cattle. And the other one, and I want to spend just a minute or two and play a little piece my father did about this, is the farm of Alvin Fisk at the bottom of West Road. And I want to spend a few minutes on it because we're all so lucky, I think, to have acquired the Fisk Pond Conservation Area. But I think a lot of people don't remember the family that lived there and the farm that was there. As you turned up West Road from the south, on the right was a small, dark cabin building lived in by a man named Lester Granger, and a huge pine tree. Remember the pine tree, Ted? Absolutely mammoth, towering pine tree over this little house. Lester Granger was a cousin of Alvin Fisk, whose farm was across the road. And there at the bottom of the road, it was all clear and open. As you turned up, the driveway is, I think, pretty much what it was. But as you turned up there, the farmhouse, it was beautifully located. The farmhouse was on the north side of that slope with a porch and some buildings, as is typical, out behind it. And across the driveway was his barn, large barn, on 2 levels. And he farmed there for many years. I have about a 3-minute tape I'd like to play that my father did remembering Alvin Fisk, and he did it at the time of the Wendell Bicentennial in 1981. Oh, my father was Broadus Mitchell.
This sketch is written from the viewpoint of one native to the South who came to Wendell as a summer resident in 1938, the year of the first modern and most remembered hurricane. Alvin Fisk was a reputation of every false idea of New England as I had heard in Virginia and South Carolina. He was not rigid, but relaxed. His speech was not sparse and acid, but was unhurried and cordial. Selfish and grasping was supposed to be the type, but he was ever friendly and helpful to a newcomer. In an August drought that greeted our arrival, he loaned us one of his large milk cans in which to store water from a distant spring. Most of his cash living was as a dairyman, but he was also woodsman, farmer, mechanic, hunter, fisherman. He was a store of country wisdom. When nearly everyone else had ceased to live from the land, he continued cultivating, haying, hauling with horses. He stored ice cut from a pond in winter, chilled his milk in a tank fed by gravity from a spring. Alifist was a conservationist, although no one called him that. He lived from what was extracted from nature, but carefully husbanded those resources. He welcomed the state's suggestion that a pair of beavers be located in his little pond. Once they had built a dam, he stocked the pond with fish. He was a leader in a group called the Franklin County White Hare Association. He may have wanted the hares for Mrs. Fisk's kitchen pot, but first there had to be enough of them. So far from the traditional grim countenance of New England granite, Fisk was a humorous man. One instance may serve as illustration. As the great hurricane of September 21st, 1938 roared past, he scurried about the place, securing and battening down everything loose. One thing escaped him, however. Above the howl of the wind, he heard something behind him and looked over his shoulder. "I've been chased by a lot of things," he said later, "but never before by a privet." Always working during the day, when you went to his house at the leisure hour, he begged you to sit down, was ready for conversation. Though he had inherited his Wendell farm from father and grandfather, I tell you, the man might have been from Georgia or Alabama, though the industry and ingenuity are not so prominent in my native parts. He stayed on the farm for a few years after Mrs. Fisk's death, helped after a time by a comfortable Irish housekeeper, Mrs. Morrissey. But before 1960, he was gone, spending his last few years in Northfield. An arsonist destroyed the empty house, and the new owner of the land removed all traces of the buildings and filled in the cellar hole. After 20 years, no trace remains of the fact that the place was farmed for upwards of 100 years. What was the Fisk driveway is the community's access to a pond, now a local swimming hole. Most who used it never heard of Alvin Fisk, but a few of us remember. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I was just going to add that Fisks were married in the little church at Locks Village on the corner there where Camp Anderson, or I don't know now what it's called. And they too are buried at Locks Village Cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final presenter is Everett, a relative newcomer to town.
Wake up. Oh, thank you. I came here in 1954. I was still a junior in high school in Boston, Mass, where I was born and raised. And we bought the farm on West Road. At those days, from the center down, actually it was Montague Road, but we've always called it West Road. And it was all dirt. Well, the top of Town Farm Hill was all tar. Then from there on was all dirt. All the roads I can think of, except the main road and Montague Road and Morse Village Road, were tar, and all the rest were dirt. And they used to come by with calcium chloride, I think, and put it on the roads in the summertime so the dust wouldn't flow through into the screens of your house. But this was the closest we could get with enough land and facilities to raise pigs, believe it or not. At that time, Route 2 wasn't built like it was now, and it took about almost 3.5 hours to get here. Now you can go to Boston in less than 2. But I lived there about 1.5 years by myself, raising pigs, working in Athol, which I worked most of my life as a machinist and grinder, and brought the pigs up in a Buick, actually, and a few orange crates when they were piglets. Till I got all 70 pigs there, then we bought the big stuff, which we used my brother's truck. We had a little pickup truck, and we used that to bring up the big sows and the boar and so forth. And so we built some pens, and that's how that started. In '55, I graduated from high school and lived up there all alone, and then raised my family. My kids went to this school. There was two rooms then, and I guess this was the main. Then they added that on later, but 2 schools. And let's see what else I can think of. Oh, I was looking at the quilt back there, and when I was scoutmaster here, I remember looking around for different sites, and I came across that kiln only once. And I asked some old timers where it was, and they never heard of it. But I just asked Peter Diamond, he told me where it was, off Mormon Hollow there, and Ted knew where it was. And there was a schoolhouse on the corner. Well, I guess there were 13 schools in Wendell way back before I came up here. Now they're all gone. This is the only one left. Was the only one left. Swift River. Let's see, I ramble. I had a cheat sheet, like Miss Diamond's. There's only one post office, and that was Lucille Lewis's in the corner up here. It was also a store. I remember Chubb Carey's store also, and Lucille used to, you could go in any time and get your mail. There were no hours. You just went in any time and asked for mail, and if you wanted something, you bought it there. The Blues had a farm. I remember that. We also had, Ted said, the Grange. And in those days, when we were teenagers, we had a softball team. Before the Grange disbanded, they took the money they had and bought us all uniforms and catches, equipment that we used, and we used to go to Minnetonka, which was stationed in Orange at that time. We played against them. We played against Shutesbury ACs, Everett. Warwick, we had a game too. In Zielinski Field in Irving, we played against the Orange Devils, which was a girls softball team. But they were famous. They went down St. Joe, Missouri for the great big playoffs, and I think we only beat them twice out of about 8 games. They were really good. Some of them are still around. Another thing I noticed, when I came up here, there were 301 people living, and they were few and far. They were spread out, but yet close, because everyone knew everybody, and no one could get in trouble because they were always there. Neighbors were good. My door was never locked. People used to just come right in, get coffee, we'd hang around, we'd work on cars, we'd play cards, did a lot of things. Now I locked the door, of course, but then we didn't. We also had an 8-party line, and I think there were different rings. I'm not sure, but different rings, so you know which was. And I think my number was 38 something.
38M4.
38M4. Just like that truck. I think I was 38M1, just like that truck. Yeah. Let's see. Mormon Hall, not Mormon Hall, the Town Farm Hill is that road that,
Wicked Pond?
no,
Bullet Pasture?
Bullet Pasture Road. The scouts, we camped out there a few times. There were no houses on that road, but I hear tell way, way back that if you went out the end of that road, that was the center of town years ago. And all those fields and stuff, those rocks were built by the CC camps, I believe, those dividing rocks. Let's see. We went to church up here. There was a choir, and Mrs. Diamond was right. There were visiting ministers. And Harry Thayer did teach Sunday school upstairs in that church. And we used to sing there, and there was a little choir. I think all Ted's nieces and nephews sang in that thing.
I didn't.
Oh, no, you didn't. And the tax collector was Rita Holland, and what was the other lady's name?
Marion Whitney.
Marion Whitney, and they lived down the first house after you pass Farley Road on the left hand. Lake Grove now owns it,
No, the next house is it.
on the left hand side, after
Yeah.
you pass Farley Road.
Millie
you pass
Millie
Lake
Glidden
Road.
lived in that
Yeah,
house
past
on the
Lake
corner.
Road.
Yeah,
That was where they lived. There's no power there. We had power in Wendell then, but they didn't. And they had an old kerosene lantern they used to use to write your tax receipts out, and also they were the newspaper people. If you had company like I did, they had to call you over there, and you had to answer everybody where they were from. And they put in the paper, and it would be in the Orange Courier, I believe, in those days. And they used to scratch pen like I used to use. Dip it in the inkwell and with that, no ballpoints. What else? Then they got the post office after they took Myron Gibbs' house, who lived down the depot. There was a person lived on the other side of the tracks was Robinson. I used to take him to work too in Athol. That now is where the post office is, where Arnie's. And Myron Gibbs ran that store and post office so many years before he died. He was also fire chief. When I first joined the fire department, I was under Fire Chief Floyd Peck. Was the chief for a little while, then came Myron, and then Roland Jean, and then myself. And that was what the fire station looked like, except it was only one bay at that time. And then later on, I think in the 60s, they built the other part onto it, and that's why I used to hold scout meetings upstairs before it was even finished. That was a good time, and I stayed in scouting about 5 years, because I heard somewhere, only an hour a week. Well, after a while, it was about 2 years of raising pigs. The money was good. I got my brother out of the service by writing politicians. I got him out of the service about 6 months earlier, and to help me. And then he went to Northeastern University, and I got rid of the pigs, and I worked at Twist Drill for about 30 years in Athol, almost 30 years. Before that went out of business, and here I am, and my kids are all grown, gone. I got grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they're all grown and gone. So that's about my history of Wendell and how I remember it.
just to follow up on Everett's pigs, before he lived there, there was a man, Avery Harrington, had about as many pigs as Everett did. And I used to, as a kid, he had a one-horse cart with a body on the back. We'd go down to the CCC camps and get the swill. But if they threw oranges or stuff away, you had to pick the meat out. You froze your hands doing it. And that's how the CCC did do a lot of road work up here. That's where a lot of your stone walls gone now. They used them for something else. But they made all the roads in the forest. The water holes they made. Yeah, all the fire holes they made. And that was in the early 40s.
I guess it's gone now. Up by Wales Head, there was a fire hole, and also the old road to Greenfield used to be all dirt and windy. There was a fire hole there that they made. Now it's all tar, and that's gone. And the old Harrington place, those of you who don't know, was Gladys Powling's parents. And she was a Harrington, and she lived at my house when she was a little girl. It was way back, of course. But I did know Mr. Harrington. He's gone now, and so isn't Gladys. One more thing, we did pay our neighbor the worst to take care of our pigs because I was still in high school, and we'd come up sometimes twice a week, and then on Saturdays bringing swill from Boston in my brother's truck to feed the pigs for the whole week. And we used to pay him to do that until I graduated, and that's how we got food. Also, on the end of my house, there was a huge barn. Ted probably had seen it. I never saw it. The person who lived there mowed it down and sold the wood, and the wood was used to build a sun porch on the Ray Wer's house. He built a porch on the house, which is still there. And the other portion was where Claire Stewart lives now. There was a two-broiler house across from her house. That wood was used to build that broiler house that Larry Word, which is Ray's brother, built. And raised broilers there for many years. I wish I'd have seen that on something we could have used. It was huge.
It was
The
big.
foundation is still there, it was way back. It was big. I've seen a picture of it from a person who used to live in that house when he was a state child. And I met him some 15 or 20 years ago, and he showed me a picture of that barn. I think it was Pine Hill Farm or some
Something like
name.
that.
And I couldn't believe the size of it. And that's about it.
Thank you all very much. We're going to stop now for some refreshments, and then we'll have some questions and answers. But during the break, you might want to look at this quilt, which was made for the Wendell Bicentennial in 1976. There's a square. The first thing I'd like to ask is that the speakers bring up any points that on which their memories were jogged, and start our discussion, and then we can open the floor for questions.
Well, I thought of one thing while we were talking. Perhaps many of you or most of you know where the little smallpox cemetery is down Morse Village Road. Those beavers introduced for the state by Mr. Fisk have made a nearly impassable water feature between here and there. But it's interesting to walk down and look at. It's very small, most of the headstones, many of them have been knocked over. The people who were buried there first were not Wendell residents, but were people visiting Wendell who died of smallpox while they were here. And after that, a few graves of local people were added because they were related to the visitors who had died. It's very small. It's on the right if you mile it so down, but I think it's worth going to look at. I think it was in the I really don't know. I think it was in the 1850s. But someone does know.
I remember 49.
Yeah, it's something like that. Something like that. Right.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Since God blew my mind. I'm Paul Godfrey, and I live down in the bottom of the valley as you go west on Montague Road. There's a hollow down there.
Mrs. Lowners.
Dan, the town and Melinda are in this battle to keep the beavers from flooding the road. And but we heard that it used to be the town farm. And we have maps of our property going back to 1915 and beyond. And Ted just mentioned that, we were just passing. And I wonder if you have any more recollections of what that place was like back in the early days.
Well, when I first was there, they had, we as kids called them hobos, but they had a lot of odd people living there. And they'd raise their own vegetables, and anybody, because we didn't have Social Security back in the 30s, and they had welfare for the old people, and they'd sell at a discount vegetables and meat and stuff, cut wood, and it went to the people on welfare, where you had to be, I forget how old, but it was older than I was. But and then afterward, the Blues bought it, and they owned it for a number of years.
And Frank Judice bought it.
Frank Judice bought it in
And
the
he did
50s.
a lot of restoring. We were restoring the upstairs,
Yeah.
so that.
The big barn is gone. It was
Yeah, Melinda's been excavating the whole place.
I see she has.
I don't know if you drive by, you can see all the.
It had beautiful fields that went way up
Yeah.
Wicket Pond Road, and they were.
She's been rebuilding
yeah.
the stone walls that go all around the property now.
And then they used to town got gravel across the road from your place,
Yeah.
the gravel
Several
banks.
pits there that we
Yeah.
found. But the history of our farm is very, very interesting. And
Yeah.
Melinda keeps finding more and more stuff as she digs.
If you go back in the old town reports, you'll find records of the people that would stay there, what they did with the money and stuff like that.
Thank you, Ted.
It was like a poor farm?
That's right. Most towns had what they called the town farm. And in Montague, it's on Route 63. I know where that one is. Orange is up toward North Orange. one thing we didn't, none of us answer was, when did we get electricity here?
47?
45.
45.
It started in 44, but we had, the town had electricity for this building, the church, the library, and the town hall. We had a Delco plant over there, and we had streetlights from here to there. And we run that, but in 1944, when Governor Tobin got elected, my father was a selectman here, and they got electricity. It come in from Amherst up through Shutesbury, up West Street, and I got a picture, I have a picture home, of the Athol Daily News showing Governor Tobin turning electricity on in 1945 over in the town hall.
So it came in from West Street.
Came up West Street, now they've branched and they come in everywhere. But that, and everybody who wanted it could get it for nothing at that time. That was the agreement with the power company, Governor Tobin made.
Sign up for nothing.
Yeah, that's why you see a lot of the poles, especially on West Street, are on private land. Up on our old place, they went up by the Harringtons, or now it's Ricketts property, it's on private land. They went with the least, because it was all open field. When I lived on West Street, we could stand on our front lawn, look up past Powlings, which is Margot Cully's, up to Harrington's, which is Ricketts, all open, because it was all farmers. Down the other way, I could look down to Worth, or Mitchell's, or Miss Bennett's folks, and beyond. But, so that's why, that's how it all came about. Yes, Jeff?
I remember that somebody told me that when that building was just, for the store was right next door to here,
Yeah,
that they had a big veranda across the front of it.
did,
Yes, I do.
And at each end, there was a telephone booth. And the booth at one end dealt with that part of town where they pulled the telephone lines from Orange. And at the other end of the veranda was another booth for the telephone lines that came from Leverett.
no, because I remember when the phones, I was in high school when we got the phones, and all our numbers were 34, 35, and they went through the Orange directory, and they went up to M1 or M8 or whatever. And so I don't remember, I'm not saying that isn't so, because before we had the public telephones, like over on Jennison Road, there was two big Jennison farms, and they had their own phone system where they could ring a bell and they'd ring to one another. So they might have had something like that then, I don't know, I don't.
I don't remember.
Because I remember the big porch on both corners there, and my grandmother lived there when I was here in grammar school. So it's, I don't know, it could be.
The exchange was Kingsdale. That was the exchange of Wendell.
Kingswood,
Kingsdale.
Kingsdale.
And Athol was Churchill.
Yeah.
Nina?
I've heard several of you mention farms, and I wonder, how did the people back then market their produce, their pigs?
We used to, when they got the right weight, we used to drive them to Brighton Abattoir, where they would sell them. They'd weigh a truck and everything, and that's how. That's where we got rid of them.
Where was that ever?
Brighton.
It was called Brighton, Mass.
Yeah,
But-
Brighton, Mass.
But another thing we did around here is, of course, all the farms, the gardens, you know, our mothers canned, and we lived off it. We had to. Made jams out of the grapes and, you know, out of all the fruit. And the pigs, I even raised pigs when I first got out of the service, but not as many as Everett. But I remember throwing one in a guy's brand new car because he bought one from me, and I said, here it is, and we threw it in. It's a 175-pound pig.
There's something I remember that I wonder whether Ted and Elsie and the others too. In the late 40s, mid to late 40s, there were evidences of the Depression pretty noticeable in some places. And one thing I can remember seeing were tiny little kind of tar paper shacks on the Depot Road.
Lumber shack.
They were almost too small for anybody to be inside except maybe to sleep. And you'd see the people sitting out on the bank
Yeah.
above the stream there.
Bushy's one
Yeah.
right there. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he Bushy's, he lived right there on New Salem and Wendell Depot Road. There's a cabin right there. I think he died there with his feet sticking out. It was just enough room for a bed. I remember it well. And a table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kathy?
I have a question. Okay, in the notice it said something about who came to Wendell trying to raise pigs or some such thing. And that, I'd like to know who that was. But I don't know if any of you have ever had a animals. If you've lived on a farm, you've had animals. So, like as not, you've probably had a pig or two. So, let me tell you my experience with a pig. Now, this was when I only had 2 children. Anyway, somebody had given me an old baby carriage, and I had one of the kids, or maybe the 2 of them, in this big baby carriage. We had a couple of pigs. Okay, the pigs got loose. They got out of the pen, and so I just put the brakes on the baby carriage, and I tried to catch the pigs. Well, it was hard. I caught one, but I caught it by the tail, of course. Oh my God, that pig, you could have heard it up here in Wendell. I got so scared I let go of it. So anyway, that was my story about the pigs.
It was Everett's family that came for the pigs.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's good to know.
My brother.
Were you able to raise some of them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. See, there's a happy ending to every story.
I was wondering about the big colonial on Jensen Road down from Molly's. You know, there's stories about it being an old tavern. And
The old Jennison place.
Yeah.
one of the stories is that they used to pull big logs through the middle of that building and roll them into the fireplace or something. Is there?
I don't remember that.
Do you
I
mean
never
the
heard
place
that.
with the big barn or the double house on that road?
There was the big colonial, and then across the street was some big stable or something. There's a foundation there.
At the end of Old Stage Road?
Yeah.
Like Jensen and Old
Do you remember anything about that?
Wasn't that when the
No.
Pony Express?
Well, that's where the Pony Express used to stop, but they used to have dances over there in the barn. That's true. In the big barn across the road, and the sugar house was just partway down the hill.
Sugar House?
That's right. But I don't remember about any logging there, but
But can you tell me anything about?
they'd come down Cooleyville, which we call the Boston Post Road,
Back then.
and then go hit Jennison, and then the stagecoach go up there.
And then Lake Wyola, that was the stagecoach.
Lake Wyola was another one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And she knows a lot about them.
There's one last, if I may. The rock walls, can you tell us anything about the long-term history of the rock, the rock walls all around?
Oh, CC camps.
Well, there's a lot of them missing because in the late 30s, early 40s, the CCC camps, they took a lot of them. They built waterways like going down through North Everett and stuff, that Sawmill River and stuff. And that's just one, but that's what they did. And they had to load them all by hand at them days.
And they marked off property lines too.
They used to mark
Like
Manali.
plowing. They plow a field and they
They'd
pick
walk
up the
out, there's a stone, there's your corner, there's a stone wall, that's your line, which we all know now isn't true.
In fact, if you walk in the woods, say down back of me, down Old Egypt Road, and there was a community back there, and there are stone walls all through those woods. That was open pasture land and farmland all over here.
But originally it was just farmers. Some people think that those walls might have been further in the past, but they were just.
I don't think so. I think they
No,
were
it's
farmers.
just like where I live now, the land I own is part of the old Fisk, Gerstle Fisk property. And if you go back, when I was growing up, back of Mrs. Bennett's house was all sawmills. Over on what we call Stillwaters, they had sawmills in there all the time. Back at my house, of course, Fisk always had a sawmill going. And we used to help cut ice down there in his pond, But them are all open fields, even when my wife and I bought it when I got it to service in '52. And he was plowing all them fields up there, putting potatoes in and everything, but they grow up so fast,
Right. Until really modern, like today, the only time when Wendell's population was as high as it is now was in the early 1800s. It was full of farms and
Yeah.
activity and.
I'm kind of curious about a couple of things. One of them is about the monk holes that are around. You know anything about those little holes? There's one out from Jennison Road near
Oh.
Temenos, and they're scattered all over the place. And I was wondering if anybody knew who made them or where
I
they.
don't know who made them. I know where you're talking about, but I don't know who made them.
My father used to talk about them, but I think he made up most of what he had to say about it.
Yeah.
Oh, he thought they were made by, he didn't, I don't think he really thought, but maybe they were made by Vikings or, you know, I don't know. Right.
There is some very little evidence, and this is also according to your father,
Right.
tracing back through some Native American dialects of some traces of, and this is how the story started, and I have no idea if it's true or not, Celtic monks. There's traces of some Celtic language in there, and that's how it came to be thought that maybe those were monk holes. And no, I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
But the rock work inside those holes, you're brave enough to crawl in there.
I am.
Beautiful.
It's really
just
cool.
gorgeously arrayed in perfect lines, and the symmetry is incredible.
Yucky
Very much like the monk caves, caves or domes in Ireland.
On the Aran Islands.
Yeah.
Yankee Magazine had an article some years ago about the monk holes, and there's the description of them and where they're located, you know, where they have been found, you know, in the New England area, so
I used
that,
to, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt
you might just, you know.
Well, I had a part of one of my field trips when I was still teaching, it wasn't that long ago, was to go take students to see Fisk Pond. And then I said, oh, and I got a great surprise for you. And we drive down the road, Jennison Road, and stop and park, and I take them into the woods down to where that long hole is, and then jump into the hole. Disappears. Where'd Dr. Godfrey go? Rawr!
I have a
I love that.
You said you had several
Some
questions.
of them did go in, and they were impressed by the rock work. Fantastic. There are several right around that particular hole that's fairly accessible.
She still has the torch on.
Just,
I'm trying to answer her.
Oh, okay.
okay.
If you're interested in what might be mythology about those monks' holes, one of the words you should look up is Culde. C-U-L-D-E-E. That's the people who are supposed to have built them. What follow this mythology?
Thank you.
Pardon me? Yes.
This is romantic, but I think you need a large grain of salt with this stuff.
The other thing I wanted to know about
Oh,
is
wait a
much
minute.
more tangible.
after whoever.
Can any of you tell me about the sawmill that was in the center over there on Ballou's property? Burnt down, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. That's all I
Well,
know
Donnie
about.
Ellis had been going down the hill, you mean?
No, here, it's actually.
Oh, down back at the Blue store?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had one there. Bob Blue had one there. And they put it there in the 60s, and then I don't know when he sold it. But
Well, Frank run it then?
no, Frank owned the buildings, but Bob put the sawmill, because Bob still had his dairy farm down the road.
It was kind of up, sort of like,
He
I
just,
think I know, I think I can see where it was. I own the property.
it's way down, yeah.
Now, and.
It's right down near the woods it
The
was.
foundation is still
Yeah.
there, I think. It's like kind of metal with some
Yeah.
cement in it.
Yeah,
It looks like it was an old
it is.
thing that,
Yeah.
and I hear stories. Because when I bought the property, oh, the sawmill.
Sharon's
Excuse me, Kathy, just gotta change the tape real quick.
to finish.
Okay, we'll just wear it out.
Yes, Ellen.
Some of those, going back to that piece about the changing tape, archaeologists don't mess with them. They think they're too recent or probably just simply built by local inhabitants to store food or various other materials, like a cold cellar.
There was some,
This was years ago. Stillwaters. Yep, that was a long time ago.
So my question was, somebody alluded to all the stonework on Bullard Pasture Road, that Bullard Pasture is the center of town. And on the old map, you can see that it goes down past where I live and then takes a sharp easter and comes up behind what was Tilly Burnett's. I don't know who owns that now. But can anybody speak to that? I remember when Jack Ellis, when I first got our property, he told me stories about when he was a boy, he would work mend fences down on the Bullard Pasture Road, and he could see West Road, and he could see the center of town from there. That's how clear it was. But I wondered, there's a lot of old cellar holes and foundations, but why was it there, and now why is it moved, and what happened?
Mrs. Lewis, who owned the store up here, no relation to me, was telling me she remembers the houses. She remembered, but I know as a kid they called it Bullard Pasture. There's a lot of cows over there, and Blues owned it at the time. But I know Mr. Powlin used to have a road cut from where Margot lives, and they'd go out there and tap trees for sugar in and stuff. But they were all open fields then, that's true. We'd go over there and get apples. There were a lot of apple trees. And the road went straight. Well, one goes out behind Burnett's, but if you go straight, it comes right out down by Billy Fisher's.
Right. Yeah. But the one on the map turns.
Yeah, they're supposed to be straight too, but that's all right.
Tell you one thing, it's awfully hard to keep open fields nowadays. A lot of mowing. It's very hard. So bring your cattle over or your sheep and use our land.
So you don't know, somebody told me a fire, there was a large forest fire that swept through, and that's why all of those houses are...
Well, there was one that took in the western part of the state because the house, not the state, the town, the house that my folks owned is with Cora Hudson's folks owned it, and they rebuilt after the fire went through. That was long before we came.
there was a forest fire in the late 40s, you remember?
Yeah, that was
there.
down back, yeah.
Right.
But this was way before that. They
Right.
took all the buildings on the western part of the
There
town.
was a fire prior to 1915.
Yeah.
Our house was burned
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
We rebuilt on the foundations. The story we got was that the fire got started by the trains that were running along the river, and sparks from the engine got into the forest, and it just came right up the hill and took everything out, including our house.
That's what I heard too. Right across from my house, there was a large house, I guess, and that stone wall is part of it. It was owned by a Boston importer, and the house that I live in now was actually the carriage shed to that house. I've never seen it, but that's the way I heard too about the fire.
There's a chestnut beam.
Yep, the chimney's still there.
1915 on it.
How long ago was that?
When was it? I don't know. I'm assuming it's when he's talking about when the fire came up through.
Is that
I
when
heard
Center
I heard the version.
Town shifted from,
No, when the fire came up
is that like,
through.
is that what made did the fire burn where the old center of town was? How did,
Oh no, this is over on West Street.
oh.
Well,
Well, it isn't that far
The
from,
center of town that used to be behind Bullard Pasture Road. Right, it's not very far from,
no, it isn't that far.
in a
from-
way, you're thinking, yeah.
Then this was just fire, drier.
Yeah,
what's there now, just forest?
Yep.
And old foundation?
sure. I had 5 fields full of field corn. I used to plow for the pigs, but you'd never know it now. It was the only house there. Now my brother's house, my mother's house is in those fields, and then across the street, it was all fields. Everything was fields. Now it's all grown up.
5 fields.
5, oh yeah.
Corn for your kids.
Sure, between Millers Falls Road and Montague Road, I own that. Well, that was an all field.
So how many acres?
Well, we used to think we had 114 until the tax map came out. We have 66.
How many acres did you put in corn?
Oh, we never, coming from the city, we don't go by that. We just went, every open field we plowed. I know there's 18 acres across the street and 22 behind and
Store all of that
7.
corn.
Well, it was field corn with pigs and a couple of cows. It don't take long to get rid of it. We did buy stuff, but yeah, we
So it
didn't
would
have a silo or anything.
It would last you a few months and then. you'd be
Oh,
fine.
sure. They ate like pigs.
Did you see how you see an increase in that? At your height?
Well, we started with 70, probably 102, something like that. And then people would buy them here and there and ship some down. Yeah. And we had 250 hens. Well, 12 at first, then I just put some more in for the heck of it.
I'm sorry, but I'm
That's all
afraid
right.
we have to stop.
Nothing wrong with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.